Do you know that moment when you're scrolling through your husband's iPad and you discover he's been putting in extra hours with his secretary instead of at the office? It turns out the urgent business meetings were code for hooking up with his 26-year-old assistant in the boardroom while I was home color sorting his socks. There I was in our immaculate Greenwich, Connecticut kitchen on a Thursday evening, holding the family iPad with trembling hands, reading messages that would make a romance novelist blush. 15 years of marriage reduced to digital evidence that my husband, Stephen Vance, the most respected financial executive at Vance Capital, was nothing more than a walking midlife crisis cliche. Working late again, honey. Don't wait up, wake up! He had texted me 3 hours earlier. Meanwhile, he was texting Paige. Boardroom B, wear that skirt. The worst part wasn't discovering the infidelity on our anniversary, or even finding out via text messages between my husband and a woman young enough for our teenage daughter to babysit. No, the worst part was realizing I had become the punchline of my own life. The oblivious wife who gave up her marketing career to manage the household while her husband managed assets with his secretary. My name is Eleanor Morales, Ellie by the way. Former marketing director, current collector of designer leggings, and now apparently the keeper of my husband's dirty laundry, literally and figuratively. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. Our story begins in Greenwich, Connecticut, where the hedges are manicured with the same meticulous care that marriages are secretly dysfunctional, where women like me organize charity galas and pretend not to notice when our husbands disappear with young assistants during the cocktail hour. That Thursday evening, while our children Sophie, 14, and Matthew, 11, were sleeping over at friends' houses, I had planned a surprise anniversary dinner. 15 years of marriage deserved at least mediocre candlelight and an extremely expensive vintage champagne. I had made a reservation at the Oak Room, ordered flowers, and even bought ridiculous lingerie that required an engineering degree to put on. Instead, I was standing in our designer kitchen, the one that looked straight out of a cooking show, even though we ordered takeout 4 nights a week. My perfect blowout wilted as fast as my illusions about my marriage as I read months of messages between my husband and his secretary. Can't stop thinking about yesterday, she had written 3 days prior. That dress is my weakness, he had replied to a picture I won't describe in detail. I poured myself a generous glass of the anniversary champagne I'd been chilling and kept reading. Steve and I hadn't had sex in 3 months, but apparently he and Paige were picking up my slack. This is where a normal woman might break down in tears, maybe call her mother or her best friend. Instead, I found myself laughing. Not the cute, feminine giggle Steve once told me was so adorable at parties, but a loud, almost hysterical cackle that echoed through our 5-bedroom colonial, because honestly, what truly got to me was the absolute lack of originality. Executive sleeps with secretary. That's the best midlife crisis you could come up with, Steve? For a man who prided himself on his disruptive financial strategies, his personal life choices were as innovative as a beige throw pillow. I took another sip of champagne and felt something shift inside me. The perfectly groomed Ellie Mitchell, the one who remembered every family birthday, who coordinated our Christmas card outfits 6 months in advance, the one who ensured his dry cleaning was always ready for his business trips, was clocking out. In her place appeared someone I hadn't seen in 15 years, the woman who once orchestrated marketing campaigns so aggressive they made competitors nervous. I opened our shared calendar app, the one Steve clearly forgot I still had access to, and saw he was scheduled to attend his company's Christmas party the following night at the Waldorf Astoria Ballroom in Manhattan, the annual event where board members, who were currently considering him for the COO position, would be present with their wives, where Paige would play the part of efficient assistant instead of afternoon delight. That's when the idea hit me with the subtlety of a freight train. Steve always complained about my laundry obsession, how I insisted on separating his gym clothes from his street clothes, how I had specific detergents for his dress shirts versus his golf polos, how I neatly folded his boxers into perfect rectangles and organized them by color in his drawer. Well, if he appreciated my laundry skills so little, perhaps Paige would value them more. I marched down to our basement laundry room, where the hamper contained almost 2 weeks of Steve's dirty clothes. He'd been too busy to bring it down earlier in the week. Too busy indeed. I pulled out every pair of boxers, every sweat-stained undershirt, every sock with that distinct man smell no amount of Tide could completely eliminate. I found the mesh lingerie bag I used for delicates and began filling it with my husband's most intimate garments. The ones with skid marks, the ones with suspicious stains, the gray ones that were once white. By midnight, I had a plan, not the dignified call a lawyer plan the Greenwich Wife manual would recommend, but a plan the former Ellie, the one who once convinced a roomful of executives to double a marketing budget during a recession, knew would be far more effective. I slept surprisingly well that night, alone in our king-size bed with its ridiculously high thread count sheets. Steve texted at 1 a.m., saying he was sleeping at the office because he was working on something big. Sure he was. The next morning, I dispatched the kids to school with my usual Friday enthusiasm. Sophie barely looked up from her phone, and Matthew was too busy talking about his weekend fortnight plans to notice anything different about Mom. Steve called to say he'd meet me directly at the Christmas party that night. Another busy day at the office. I told him I was really looking forward to it with the kind of sincerity normally reserved for thanking your mother-in-law for an ugly sweater. As I sipped my morning coffee in our kitchen, watching a stream of neighborhood wives power walk past our house in their coordinated athleisure wear, I thought about the woman I'd become, how I'd traded boardroom presentations for PTA meetings, strategy sessions for menu planning, and for what? So Steve could live out the most basic infidelity plot known to man. Well, if he wanted basic, I was about to give him something much more original. I spent the day preparing. I went to the salon on Fifth Avenue. Balayage highlights don't maintain themselves during a crisis. I picked up my Oscar de la Renta dress from the dry cleaners, a classic black with just the right neckline to be elegant yet striking. I even got a manicure and pedicure in rage red, a color I usually avoided for being too loud. Meanwhile, the mesh bag of Steve's dirty underwear sat in the trunk of my Mercedes-Benz like a ticking time bomb. You see, when you've spent 15 years planning perfect dinner parties and school fundraisers, you develop a certain flair for event management. And that night's Christmas party was about to become the most memorable event in Vance Capital history. The question wasn't if I would confront Steve's infidelity, it was how spectacularly I would do it. Because if there's one thing the ladies of Greenwich understand better than anyone, it's that presentation is everything. Vance Capital's annual Christmas party at the Waldorf Astoria Ballroom was exactly the kind of event that makes Greenwich feel like a parody of itself. Men in nearly identical navy suits, pretending their six-figure bonuses were only acceptable this year, while their wives compared houses in Palm Beach and plastic surgeons in the same sentence. I arrived fashionably late, which in Greenwich translates to exactly 17 minutes past the start time. I truly wonder if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be quiet to maintain peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. Early enough to look interested, late enough to make an entrance. The valet gave my Volvo that slightly disappointed look reserved for cars worth less than $100,000, completely unaware that the most valuable object in it wasn't the vehicle, but the mesh laundry bag in my designer clutch. The ballroom was decorated in what I can only describe as corporate Christmas elegance. Just enough sparkle to acknowledge the season without offending anyone who might celebrate something else. A 10-foot tree dripping with silver and blue, the company colors naturally, dominated one corner, while ice sculptures shaped like the dollar sign slowly melted on the buffet table. Subtle. I located Steve immediately. He's a beacon in any crowded room, especially when standing suspiciously close to his assistant. Steve was holding court near the bar, one hand gesticulating emphatically as he no doubt explained some brilliant financial strategy, the other resting a little too comfortably on Paige's lower back. Paige, in a dress that probably cost her entire monthly paycheck, was gazing up at him with the kind of adoration normally reserved for boy bands and religious figures. Her desk might be outside Steve's office, but it was clear she'd spent plenty of time inside it. "Ellie, there you are!" My best friend, Victoria Sanders, materialized at my side, a glass of Prosecco already in hand. I was starting to worry you'd skip this thrilling display of corporate self-congratulation. Vicky had been my anchor of sanity since we both moved to Greenwich a decade ago. Her husband, Carl, also worked at Vance Capital, But unlike Steve, Carl actually seemed to enjoy coming home to his wife. I would never miss a chance to watch middle-aged men get progressively grab handier as the open bar works its magic, I replied, accepting the glass she offered. You look different tonight, Vicky said, studying my face. Finally tried that new Botox place on Park Avenue? No, just the sudden clarity that comes with discovering your husband is sleeping with his secretary. I said it so casually that Vicky nearly choked on her Prosecco. He what? Sleeping with Paige. Having an affair? Dipping his pen in the company ink. Pick the euphemism you're most comfortable with. I took a sip of champagne. I found their messages last night, on our anniversary. That absolute lowlife, Vicky whispered, her eyes darting to where Steve was now laughing with Richard Vance, his father and the company founder. What are you going to do? Please tell me you've called Patty. Patricia Ross was the divorce lawyer who had guided half the Greenwich Country Club through their marital dissolutions. Oh, I have something more immediate planned, I said, patting my clutch. Something a little more public. Vicky's eyes widened. Ellie Mitchell, what is in that bag? 15 years of laundry service gift wrapped for the other woman. Before Vicky could respond, Richard Vance spotted me and beckoned me over. I'd always been a favorite of Steve's dad, probably because I spent years making his son look good. There's my favorite daughter-in-law, Richard boomed as I approached. In his 70s, he still had the energy and volume of a man half his age. Steve was just telling us about the Robertson account. Brilliant work. Oh, yes. I smiled, giving Steve a look that made him visibly uncomfortable. He's been working very hard lately. All those late nights at the office. Steve cleared his throat. Just doing what needs to be done, Dad. Isn't that right? I said sweetly. Then I turned to Paige, who was hovering nearby with her tablet, playing the part of dedicated assistant. Paige, you look lovely tonight. That dress is stunning. Thank you, Mrs. Vance, she replied, having the decency to blush. I just picked it up at Neiman Marcus. How resourceful of you, I said. Steve always appreciates a woman who knows how to maximize her resources. Right, honey? Steve loosened his tie slightly. Ellie, have you met the new board members? They're eager to chat about that charity gala you chaired last spring. Classic deflection. Steve had always been good at rerouting awkward conversations, a skill that probably served him well juggling a wife and a mistress. I'd be delighted, I said. But first, I need to give Paige something. A thank you gift, if you will. Richard clapped his hands. Always so thoughtful. That's why everyone loves Ellie. She never forgets anyone. If only he knew how thoughtful I was about to be. Paige, can we just step over to your desk for a moment? I've brought something that might be useful for your position. Steve's face went from uncomfortable to alarmed. Ellie, perhaps now is not the... Nonsense. It will just be a minute. We'll be right back. I hooked my arm through Paige's, leaving Steve no option but to watch us leave or make a scene in front of his father and the board members who were about to decide his professional future. Paige's desk was on the executive floor, the top floor of the building, which was open for the party so guests could admire the Manhattan skyline views. A few couples were already on the terrace admiring the December lights. Mrs. Vance, is everything all right? Paige asked when we reached her meticulously organized workstation. A framed picture of Steve and the executive team sat next to her computer, Steve's face front and center. That depends on your definition of all right, I said, placing my clutch on her desk. Tell me, Paige, do you know what day today is? She blinked her expertly made-up eyelashes. Friday, December 13th. Yes, but more specifically, it's the day after my 15th wedding anniversary. The anniversary my husband forgot because he was too busy sending you inappropriate texts about your skirt. The color drained from her face. Mrs. Vance, I don't know what you're... Oh, spare me. The innocent act is beneath us both. I opened my clutch and pulled out the mesh laundry bag. You know, when I gave up my marketing career to support Steve, I took on a lot of roles. Chief laundry officer was the primary one. I inverted the bag over her desk, and Steve's dirty underwear tumbled out in a cascade over her keyboard, her notepad, and the elegant company-branded pen set she had so painstakingly arranged. 15 years of marriage reduced to a pile of stained boxers and sweaty undershirts. Since you've been managing my husband's affairs, I thought you might want to take over his laundry too, I said as Paige stared in horror at the intimate garments now decorating her workspace. The ones with the skid marks are the blue ones. He really needs to up his fiber intake. By this time, a small crowd had gathered. The executive floor was never this accessible, and party guests couldn't resist exploring. What they found was the dirty laundry of Greenwich's most talked about financial executive, literally strewn across his secretary's desk. "What the hell is going on here?" Steve appeared, his face red with anger or embarrassment, possibly both. His father was right behind him, along with 3 board members and their wives. "Just dropping off your dirty laundry, dear," I said cheerfully. Since Paige has been attending to so many of your personal needs, I assumed she wouldn't mind taking on one more. Richard Vance looked at the scene, then at his son, his bushy eyebrows nearly touching his hairline. "Steve, what is she talking about?" I pulled out my phone and displayed the screen with one of the most explicit exchanges between my husband and his assistant. "Would you like me to read this aloud? Or would you prefer I just email it to the board distribution list? I think I'm still on it from when I organized the summer golf tournament." The room fell so silent, you could hear the ice sculptures melting downstairs. Steve lunged towards me, his voice low. "Ellie, are you making a scene?" "No, Steve," I corrected him, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You made the scene when you decided to sleep with your secretary instead of coming home for our anniversary. I'm just ensuring the backdrop is properly decorated." Vicky appeared at my side, a look of horrified delight on her face. She looped her arm through mine in solidarity. "Mrs. Vance," one of the board members' wives said, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Why didn't my husband keep it private? Why should I?" I turned back to Paige, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "By the way, he likes his shirts heavily starched, and he's allergic to fabric softener, just so you know." As I turned to leave with Vicky, I paused next to Steve. "I'll see you at home. Don't wait up." I repeated his message from the night before, then added sweetly, "Oh, and happy anniversary." The walk through the Christmas party toward the exit felt like a victory lap. Behind me, chaos was erupting in the executive suite, with Steve scrambling to salvage both his reputation and his promotion prospects. But the night was young, and I was only getting started. By Saturday morning, my underwear exhibition had become the talk of Greenwich faster than you could say, non-disclosure agreement. My phone was buzzing with texts, some supportive, others feigning concern while angling for juicy details. The Greenwich Gossip Network operates with an efficiency the FBI would envy. I was enjoying my coffee in peaceful solitude when Steve finally arrived home, looking like he'd spent the night in his office chair, which he probably had. The board members hadn't exactly rushed to offer him a guest room after the spectacle he'd put on. "You have completely lost your mind," he demanded, throwing his keys onto the kitchen counter with enough force to chip our imported marble. That would annoy him later. Steve was very particular about household surfaces he rarely cleaned. "Good morning to you too," I replied, not bothering to look up from my New York Times crossword. "There's coffee in the pot, though you might prefer Paige bring you some. Do you have any idea what you've done?" He paced the floor, his designer shoes squeaking against our impeccable hardwood. "Dad has postponed the board decision on my promotion. 15 years of work, and you destroyed it in 5 minutes with your juvenile stunt." I carefully put down my pen and looked at him. I really looked at him. The man I had married 15 years ago had been ambitious, but principled. Somewhere along the line, he'd kept the ambition and discarded everything else. "Correction. You destroyed it when you decided to have an affair with your 26-year-old secretary. I just made the destruction public." Steve ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that once made my heart race, but now only reminded me how much we spent on his high-end shampoo. "It wasn't an affair," he said, his voice softer now. It was just a fling, a stupid mistake." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "A fling? Do you want me to read the texts aloud? The ones describing what you did to her in the boardroom after hours. Or perhaps we should discuss the hotel receipts I found while reviewing our credit card statements this morning." That got his attention. His face paled beneath his weekend stubble. "You reviewed our financial records?" "I reviewed everything, Steve. While you were busy doing damage control at the office, I was doing reconnaissance at home." I took a satisfied sip of coffee. Did you really think I wouldn't notice charges at the Plaza Hotel on random Wednesday afternoons? We live 15 minutes away. Why would you need a hotel room unless you had company? The truth was, I hadn't noticed. Not until now. I'd been too busy being the perfect wife, managing our perfect life to see it was all built on quicksand. But Steve didn't need to know my detective work had been retroactive rather than proactive. It was a mistake, he repeated, slumping into a kitchen chair. A stupid midlife crisis. It meant nothing. How fascinating, I said, folding my newspaper. Because I just got off the phone with Patricia Ross. Steve's head snapped up. Everyone in Greenwich knew Patty, the divorce lawyer who had fleeced half the fund managers in the area. You called a divorce lawyer? His voice cracked slightly. Ellie, don't you think you're overreacting? Can't we work past this? We can, I'm just not sure I want to. I stood up and walked to the refrigerator, pulling out a pitcher of fresh squeezed orange juice I'd prepared earlier. Orange juice! I made it this morning. No pulp, just how you like it. Steve looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. You're offering me juice while telling me you're divorcing me? Multitasking is my superpower. You used to call it annoying when I planned a charity gala while cooking dinner and helping Matthew with his science project. I poured him a glass anyway. And I didn't say I was divorcing you. I said I called Patty. What's the difference? He took the juice, probably out of habit. The difference is Patty gave me options. I believe in exploring all my options before committing, unlike you. Just then, Sophie strolled into the kitchen, her eyes glued to her phone. At 14, she had perfected the art of being simultaneously present and completely absent. Mom. Olivia's mom wants to know if you're still chaperoning the winter formal next week, or if you're too busy destroying Dad's career. She didn't even look up as she dropped the bombshell. Steve choked on his orange juice. What? Sophie finally looked up, shrugging with the indifference only a teenager can muster. It's all over Instagram, Dad. Mrs. Thompson videotaped it. You're basically a meme. She opened the fridge and pulled out a yogurt. By the way, Matthew's at Tyler's until noon. Tyler's mom said she'll bring him back. With that, she glided back upstairs, leaving Steve and me in stunned silence. A video, Steve whispered, horror dawning on his face. There's a video. Apparently. I didn't know about the video until now, but I wasn't about to admit it. The joys of living in the digital age. Nothing stays private for long. Not affairs, not dirty laundry, nothing. Steve looked like he might vomit on our custom-tiled backsplash. Ellie, what do you want? Money, the house. Just tell me what will make this go away. And there was the assumption that everything had a price. That's how Steve had navigated his entire adult life, identifying what people wanted and calculating if he could afford to give it to them. What I want, I said carefully, is something you can't buy. Try me, he challenged, desperation giving him a second wind of confidence. I want you to understand what it feels like to have your value determined by someone else, to be reduced to a function instead of a person. Steve's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? For 15 years, I've been the CEO of this household. Tell me whether you have parents, grandparents, or older family members who deserve more respect than they currently receive from their families. Alternatively, tell me if you yourself are going through a situation in which you're not appreciated as much as you truly deserve. I've managed our social calendar, raised our children, maintained our home, supported your career, and organized every aspect of your personal life. Yet, at some point, you decided I was replaceable, or at least parts of me were. I walked over to the built-in desk in our kitchen where I meticulously organized our family papers. From the drawer, I pulled out a manila folder. This is my counteroffer, I said, sliding it across the island to him. Counteroffer to what? Steve asked, not touching the folder. To divorce. Patty helped me draft it yesterday. He finally opened the folder and began reading the document, his expression transforming from confusion to disbelief. This is insane, he muttered, flipping through the pages. You can't be serious. I am completely serious. Think of it as a post-nuptial agreement. The terms are simple. You can remain in this marriage and in this house, but with a few adjustments to your job description. Steve stared at me. My job description? Since you seem to value Paige's professional contributions over my domestic ones, I figured it was time for a role swap. I tapped the document. You will be taking over all household management duties: laundry, cleaning, cooking, kids' drop-offs and pickups, social coordination, everything I've been doing while you built your career and your extracurricular activities. And what will you be doing? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I've accepted a position at Soda Creative, I replied with a smile. Vicky's husband, Carl, has been trying to recruit me for years to rebuild their marketing department. I start Monday. Steve's jaw literally dropped. You accepted a job without consulting me? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I need to consult you before making decisions about my body and my time? It's interesting because you certainly didn't consult me before spending yours with Paige. The front door opened and shut, followed by the sound of 11-year-old feet thundering down the hall. Mom, Dad, Tyler has the new PlayStation and his mom says they might get a dog. Can we get a dog too, please? Matthew burst into the kitchen, all freckles and energy, oblivious to the tension. We'll talk about that later, champ, I said, ruffling his hair. Why don't you go upstairs and take a shower? You smell like you slept in a chip bag. That's because Tyler's mom let us have chips for breakfast, he announced proudly before bounding up the stairs. When he was gone, Steve carefully closed the folder. Are you using our children as pawns? No, Steve. I'm protecting them from understanding exactly how their father betrayed their mother, which is more than you deserve. I picked up my coffee cup and headed toward the door. Then I stopped. You have until Monday morning to decide. Option 1, you sign the agreement and commit to the new arrangement. Option 2, I file for divorce and Patty ensures your dirty laundry becomes a very public record during the process. Your choice. I left him sitting there, staring at the document that would redefine our marriage if he chose to save it. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and finally allowed myself a moment of uncertainty. I'd spent the last 24 hours running on pure adrenaline and righteous anger. The strategic planner in me had taken over, but now in the quiet of my room, I wondered if I was making the right decision. Then I heard the ping of a text notification on my phone. It was Vicky. Battle stations ready. Operation Phoenix Go, whenever you are. I smiled. The old Ellie, the marketing executive who once orchestrated campaigns that changed consumer behavior nationwide, wasn't just back. She was barely warming up. Monday morning arrived with that kind of crisp December chill that makes Greenwich wives clutch their cashmere cardigans a little tighter. I stood in front of my closet, the one Steve always joked was bigger than our first apartment, and surveyed my options with new eyes. No more Greenwich wife uniform of designer leggings and subtle jewelry. Today required corporate armor. I selected a sharp charcoal gray pantsuit I had preserved like a museum artifact from my former life, paired with heels that meant business and a red lipstick that shouted it. 15 years of school bake sales hadn't dulled my ability to dress to kill. Steve had spent the weekend alternating between sulking in his home office and making clumsy attempts at reconciliation, including a pathetic bouquet of grocery store flowers and an offer to talk things out over dinner. I had declined both, spending my time instead finalizing my strategy with Vicky and overhauling my professional wardrobe. When I walked downstairs, Steve was standing in the kitchen holding the document I had presented to him, his signature freshly scrawled on the bottom. He looked like a man attending his own funeral. I signed it, he said unnecessarily, holding it out to me. I hope you're satisfied. I accepted the folder with a pleasant smile. Satisfaction isn't really the goal here, Steve. Accountability is. He loosened his tie, the maroon Hermes one I'd given him last Christmas. So, what happens now? Now, I said, glancing at my watch. You take the kids to school. You have to drop Sophie off first, then Matthew. Matthew has basketball practice after school, so he needs to be picked up at 5:30, not 3:15. There's a lasagna in the fridge with baking instructions taped to the top. The dry cleaning needs to be picked up before noon, and the cleaning lady called in sick, so you'll have to handle the bathrooms before the Sanders come over for dinner at 7. Steve stared at me, aghast. Dinner with the Sanders tonight? Yes, I accepted a position with Carl. Remember, we're celebrating. I took the liberty of putting the details in your calendar. The one you apparently only check for hotel appointments with assistants half your age. His face flushed. Ellie, I have a board meeting today. They're reconsidering the promotion after I spent all weekend doing damage control. Good for you, I replied, collecting my new designer briefcase. I have a meeting with the Soto Creative executive team to outline my strategy for overhauling their entire marketing approach. I guess we both have interesting Mondays. I can't just drop everything to be a house husband, he protested, following me toward the garage door. I turned to look at him. Interesting. That's exactly what you asked me to do 15 years ago when Sophie was born. Just for a few years, you said. We can afford it, you said. Family first, you said. Tell me, Steve, did Paige count as family too? Or was that more of an extracurricular activity? That shut him up faster than a Dow Jones crash. The school drop-off line backs up around 7:45, so you'll want to leave in about 10 minutes, I advised, touching up my lipstick in the hall mirror. Oh, and don't forget, you need to recharge the cafeteria accounts today. The portal password is in the household folder in my desk drawer. Good luck. I walked out the door to the sound of Steve frantically calling for the children to hurry up, a symphony I had conducted solo for a decade and a half. Soto Creative occupied a renovated warehouse in Stamford CT with that kind of sleek industrial aesthetic that screamed, we're creative but also successful. When I walked in, Vicky was waiting for me in the lobby, practically vibrating with excitement. You look incredible, she gushed, hugging me. Like a phoenix rising from a pile of dirty underwear. Poetic as always, I chuckled. Is everything ready? Carl has the whole team gathered in the boardroom, and you'll never guess who called this morning asking if we had any open positions. I raised an eyebrow. Who? Paige Jenkins. Vicky's smile was downright predatory. Apparently, she suddenly finds the atmosphere at Vance Capital uncomfortable. I couldn't help but laugh. Did she mention if she had any experience in laundry? I told her we'd keep her resume on file, Vicky scoffed, in the circular file. The morning at Soto Creative was a whirlwind of introductions and the heady feeling of being valued for my brain instead of my hosting skills. By noon, I had approved a new campaign direction and scheduled meetings with 3 potential clients who had apparently been waiting for someone with real vision to join the firm. During lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from Steve. How do I reschedule a dentist appointment? Dr. Perez's office called and Matthew was supposed to go today at 2. I didn't bother to reply yet. Learning through failure had always been Steve's preferred method, at least for everyone else. Now he could try it himself. Another text arrived 10 minutes later. Found the portal password, but it doesn't work. The kids say they are literally starving, Matthew's quote. And the dry cleaner says they don't have anything under Vance. It's under your name, isn't it? Everything is under your name. Ping. 15 years of marriage. And he had just realized that the infrastructure of our entire life, from the dry cleaning accounts to the doctor's appointments, had been invisibly managed by me. My name on everything because I was the one who always handled it. I silenced my phone and turned back to my meeting, where people were actually taking notes on what I had to say. That evening, I arrived home at 6:45 p.m. to find our house in a state that could generously be described as lived in and accurately as post-apocalyptic. Dishes filled the sink, school backpacks had exploded in the entryway, and Steve was standing in the middle of the kitchen looking like he'd gone 10 rounds with a tornado. The lasagna burned, he announced, gesturing to a blackened dish in the sink, and Matthew spilled an entire gallon of milk trying to make himself afternoon cereal. Fascinating, I replied, setting down my briefcase. The Sanders will be here in 15 minutes. I know. His voice rose an octave. I ordered pizza, but the place said it might be late and I couldn't find the good napkins. And Sophie refuses to come downstairs because apparently everyone at the high school saw the video of you dumping my underwear on Paige's desk. I poured myself a glass of the Cabernet Steve had poorly opened, judging by the cork chunks floating in it. The good napkins are in the dining room sideboard. Second drawer left, behind the placemats. The candles are in there too. Sophie will come down if you tell her Vicky brought the new Sephora Christmas collection for a sneak peek. And the pizza's fine. I sipped my wine, wincing at the cork. Oh, and the board called me today. Steve froze mid-frenzied counterwipe. Vance Capital's board called you? Why? Apparently Richard was quite impressed by my candor at the Christmas party. He said it reminded him of how I used to handle difficult clients back when I was in marketing and we first met. I swirled my wine. He also mentioned he's reassessing the firm's direction, particularly regarding executive leadership. What does that mean? Steve's voice was barely a whisper. It means, I said, putting down my glass, that your father is considering whether someone who can't ethically manage his personal affairs should be trusted to manage clients' investments. He's invited me to lunch tomorrow to discuss my ideas on the matter. The doorbell rang before Steve could reply. That will be the Sanders, I said cheerfully. You might want to change your shirt. You have what looks like marinara sauce on your collar. The Italian place on Main Street never seals their takeout containers properly. As Steve scrambled upstairs, I opened the door to welcome Vicky and Carl, both smiling like they'd won the lottery. How was day one of the Steve Vance rehabilitation program? Carl asked, handing me a bottle of decent wine. Educational, I replied, for us both. Vicky peeked over my shoulder into the chaotic house. I see he's excelling at domestic management the same way he excelled at marital fidelity. He's learning, I said, accepting the Sephora bag Vicky had brought for Sophie. Sometimes growth requires a complete collapse of the existing structure. Carl nodded in appreciation. I see the marketing strategist never really left you. Just rebranding, I winked, leading them toward the disaster zone Steve was now frantically attempting to tame. Watching my husband, the man who once lectured me on the importance of presentation, struggle to fold throw blankets and hide dirty dishes brought me a satisfaction no amount of retail therapy could match. The best revenge, I was discovering, wasn't just living well, it was ensuring the person who wronged you had a front row seat to your rebirth. 1 year later. I was standing in our kitchen, immaculate now, since Steve had finally mastered the art of cleaning, watching out the window as my husband struggled to hang the Christmas lights on our maple tree. The same task he once declared too tedious and hired out was now firmly in his job description, right alongside laundry, meal planning, and maintaining our social calendar. He's using the wrong ladder again, Vicky observed, sipping her coffee next to me. Our Saturday lunches had become a tradition since the Great Underwear Revolution, as we'd come to call it. I know, I replied, but he'll figure it out when he can't reach the high branches. Growth requires failure. You're incredibly zen lately, Vicky laughed. Corporate success suits you. She wasn't wrong. In the 12 months since I'd returned to the workforce, Soto Creative had doubled its client base, largely due to my overhaul of their marketing strategy. The promotion to Chief Marketing Officer had come after just 6 months, along with an office that had a real door instead of those ridiculous open-concept cubicles that make everyone feel like they're perpetually auditioning for their jobs. Speaking of corporate success, Vicky continued, have you made a decision about Richard's offer? Ah, yes, the offer. 4 months after my underwear exhibition, Richard Vance had restructured the executive team at Vance Capital. Steve had kept his job, but he'd lost his shot at the top spot. Instead, Richard had created a new position, head of client relations, and offered it to me. I'm still considering it, I said, watching Steve almost fall off the ladder. The irony is delicious, but I'm not sure I want to work with my husband every day. I've just gotten used to having adult conversations that don't involve school authorizations or pasta preferences. Through the window, I could see Sophie emerge from the house, phone predictably in hand, to critique her father's decorating efforts. At 15, she had blossomed once released from the shadow of her parents' dysfunctional marriage. Matthew, now 12, was at basketball practice, driven there by Steve in the minivan he once refused to be seen in, but which he now piloted with the grim determination of a man who had learned that status symbols don't make the school run. The doorbell rang and Vicky raised an eyebrow. Expecting someone? Just the finishing touch to our holiday preparations, I said with a smile. Heading to open it, standing on the porch was Paige Jenkins, holding a large shopping tote and looking considerably less polished than she had during her secretary days. After the Christmas party incident, she had left Vance Capital and through a series of career stumbles that involved absolutely no subtle sabotage on my part, had ended up working for the high-end cleaning service we used for special occasions. Mrs. Vance, she nodded stiffly. I'm here for the pre-holiday deep clean. Of course, I said warmly, stepping aside. Steve will show you where the supplies are kept. He's become quite the expert in household management. The look that passed between Paige and Steve as he walked in and found her standing in our foyer was worth every penny of the exorbitant fee the cleaning service charged. Paige will be helping us with the holiday prep, I informed him. Since we're hosting both our families this year, I thought an extra pair of hands would be useful. You two already know each other's preferences, so I'm sure you'll work wonderfully together. Steve's face cycled through at least 5 distinct emotions before settling on resigned acceptance. This was our new normal. I made the money and the decisions. He made the beds and the dinner. The guest bathroom needs special attention, he told Paige in the professional tone he'd developed for domestic matters. The kids constantly bring friends over, and they somehow manage to get toothpaste literally everywhere. As they walked away, Vicky clapped slowly by my side. That was either the cruelest or the most brilliant thing I've ever witnessed. Why not both? I shrugged. Besides, it's not cruelty, it's closure for all of us. That night, with the house gleaming and the children occupied with Christmas movies, Steve and I sat in the living room with glasses of wine, properly opened this time, as domestic failure had made him surprisingly adept with a corkscrew. Richard called again about the position, Steve said, breaking our comfortable silence. He thinks you're the missing piece of the firm's client strategy. And what do you think? I asked, curious despite myself. Steve considered his glass. I think my father recognizes talent when he sees it. I think I was an idiot for taking you for granted. And I think if anyone deserves that corner office with a view, it's you. I studied him. The man I had married, lost, and then rediscovered in the strangest possible way. He had changed over the last year. The arrogance had been scrubbed away along with countless paste stains and bathroom messes. In its place was something I hadn't seen since we were young. Humility. You know what's ironic? I said. For 15 years, I managed our home while you managed investments. Now I manage campaigns while you manage our home. We've completely swapped roles, and somehow we're both better at our new jobs than we were at the old ones. Steve laughed. A genuine laugh, not the forced social chuckle he'd perfected for client dinners. I made partner because I could spot market patterns. Turns out I completely missed the pattern in my own life, which was that being a partner means being an actual partner, not subcontracting the parts you don't want to deal with. I raise my glass, I said, to belated revelations. He clinked his glass against mine. And to dirty laundry, both the kind you wash and the kind you air. We sat in silence for a moment, the Christmas tree lights reflecting in our windows, before Steve asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. Ellie, are we going to be okay? Truly okay? I considered this. The affair had broken something fundamental between us, but the aftermath had forced a rebuild that was surprisingly stronger in many ways. I think, I said carefully, we're going to be better than okay. We're going to be honest. Outside, it began to snow, dusting our meticulously decorated yard with new possibilities. Steve would have to shovel the driveway in the morning. It was in our contract. But perhaps I'd help him, not because I had to, but because I was starting to want to. The greatest revenge isn't just making your cheating husband do laundry for eternity, though that part is undeniably satisfying. The greatest revenge is reclaiming yourself so thoroughly that the betrayal simply becomes a plot point in your origin story, not the defining chapter. Or as I like to say, sometimes you have to air all the dirty laundry to figure out which relationships are color fast and which ones bleed.